Take a look at this land for sale in Illinois. This is a property that's 2.5 acres listed for $10,000 on Lafayette Avenue in a little town called Jacksonville. 2.5 acres for 10 grand sounds like a pretty good bargain to me, especially when you look at this comp. That's a 1.5 acre lot that sold at $27,500, plus this other one on State Street. So 1 acre property that sold at 30 grand. Both those properties are smaller than the property in the listing, and yet they sold at higher prices. When it comes to that 2.5 acre property, you go into the listing description and they talk about endless potential. Endless potential. But like, is it though? Does a lot that looks like a pool noodle with niche industrial zoning, does that really qualify as endless potential? No. But even though it's marketed as having endless potential, it does have some potential because you have the M1 light industrial zoning classification. You can put a manufacturing facility, you can put a sales and service retail location, you can put a warehouse location, storage location, but you can't build a private residence though. You can't build a home unless that dwelling unit is secondary to one of the other commercial uses that I described. So you're really eliminating 99% of the buyers in the marketplace on zoning alone. And when you look at the shape of the property, it's got a really weird shape to it. In fact, it's about 100 feet in width and about 1,320 feet in depth. But what about the setbacks? Because here you're looking at 50-foot setbacks from the front, 20 feet from either side, which means that these are the setbacks from the front and side where you can't actually build. So that compresses your footprint to about 60 feet in buildable width on this pool noodle shaped property. Is that buildable? Probably so, maybe. But there's another issue that comes up in the listing because what you see is that in the description, it says the property was formerly old railroad tracks. So that's not good. I don't think that's good. Look at the street view photo of the concrete platform alongside the road that's like overgrown by trees. I'm pretty sure the railroad tracks are still there, by the way. What happens if you clear all those trees? Is it going to be flat and cleared like a putting green? Or are you going to find eroded concrete, rusted nails, and metal train tracks that you're going to have to clear at your own expense? I think you're going to find the old train tracks are still there. You can't just snap your fingers and remove stuff like that. You also have some potential encroachments from the neighboring landowners next to this property too. It looks like a portion of Billy's furniture store appears to extend into the property. It looks like they're using a potential driveway that actually cuts through the land. Then you also have a neighbor's house at 521 Sheridan Street, may also be a permanent encroachment on that land. But just to add insult to injury, there's one more thing that we found on this land. And when you look on a sign next to the road, you see a partially overgrown sign that says warning gas pipeline. Now, there appears to be what is a hidden underground gas pipeline with an accompanying utility easement that would run 50 feet in either direction of that gas line. But you got to find out where that is because even if you have an underground gas line, you got to actually see where the utility easement is and how far into your land that goes in because this 10K lot is hiding a 50K problem. Because the hidden expenses of building on this land are going to cost you more than the land is actually worth. And if you bought this land at $10,000, then you would be the one this time next year that would be on the market trying to sell it at 10K. But the problem is you wouldn't be able to because nobody's going to buy that land at $10,000. And that's what this video is all about. By the way, if you want to see the step-by-step process of buying a piece of land and making sure you don't miss anything important along the way, download the land purchase roadmap. It's a free document. It's a guide that we've used, and it's a link in the description below. Now, let's look at this property. It's a 7-acre piece of land listed at $12,900 in Chapmanville, West Virginia. It's a 7-acre piece of land for $12.5K. I mean, sounds pretty reasonable to me, especially when you look at this 4.3 acres down the way that sold at $40,000 not too long ago, plus this 5.4 acre listing that sold at 25 grand. So it would seem that we're getting a pretty good bargain here until you notice there's a little bit of a red flag on this property. And in a word, that red flag is slope. Take a look at the extreme slope using the land ID and contour maps in this mapping system, because the tight clusters of contour lines together mean that in a very short horizontal distance, you're gaining or losing a lot of elevation, which means it's very steep. In fact, the grade at some of these locations is greater than 50% grade. So when you look at Street View, are you kidding me? Look at this. Are you getting this? Can you imagine putting your driveway on this piece of land? I mean, how much would you have to pay to engineer a driveway to even get into the part of the property that's reasonably flat? And even if you could do that, how safe do you feel driving that driveway in the middle of winter with snow and ice on the ground? I mean, how is that going to work out? There's also a creek right next to the road. So there's that. That's not helpful. That's not good. Now you want a creek, but next to the road, it's a problem because you have to get to the other side of it in order to actually use the property. There's a term called a blue line stream. Blue line means it shows up on the county map or the geology map as a blue line. That means that you have environmental regulations that apply. So if you had to put a driveway in, you'd have to get a culvert, and you have to put gravel, you have to get an engineered driveway over top of the creek. Now, even if you could do that, you actually have a riparian buffer too, which means that you have a 50-foot setback where you can't build a permanent structure. That pushes your site plan further up that hill, and it artificially elongates the driveway and adds to the expense of building on this property. That's already in a remote mountainous location, so good luck finding the contractor that's going to hold your hand and walk you through this whole process, by the way. See, there's so many hidden challenges in building a home on this property. See, the earthwork alone, the excavation, the grading, the leveling, you may have $40,000 to $80,000 or more in additional cost. Then by the time you get to a relatively flat location, you're still dealing with extreme slope. Even where it's flat, it's still extreme. So you're talking about an engineered building foundation, piers, retaining walls, just specialized systems. Everything's more expensive. Everything's inconvenient. And then if you want to build a septic system, it's just, a little bit of a dicey proposition when you're talking about slope because you have to manage the drain field at a really steep grade. And so you have to talk to a soil engineer, an engineering firm that can give you like a specialized site plan to see if it's even possible to do. I'm not sure it is. So it's a disaster. The added costs of building on this property would be easily more than $100,000 in extra cost compared to a piece of land nearby that was more manageable. So you would do well to pass on buying this piece of property. By the way, if you want to learn to analyze land like this, it's not as hard as it looks because I break it down into a simple step-by-step process called Land Purchase Navigator, which you can find on our website if you're interested. Now look at this listing on Maple Branch Road in Reevesville, South Carolina. This is a 1 acre property that's listed at $11,000. It's a fully wooded lot in Dorchester County, South Carolina. But look at these comps. You have an acre that sold at $20K and you had a 0.8 acre, less than 1 acre that sold at $30K. So you could be forgiven for thinking that this land is being acquired at a pretty good deal. I mean, how could you possibly go wrong, right? Well, when you look at the actual minimum lot and dimensional requirements at this building code, you start to wonder, is this land even wide enough to build? Because the first thing you see is it's a non-conforming lot because there's a minimum lot width of 100 feet in this zoning district. But our lot's only 60 feet in width, which means that it's non-compliant to the actual zoning code. So with a lot of these grandfathered non-conforming lots, there's two basic ideas. One is legal non-conforming, the other is illegal non-conforming. Legal non-conforming means that you can build as long as, even though it's a non-conforming lot, you can build as long as you meet the current setbacks. So I would imagine that this is a legal non-conforming lot and you could build if you could build within the setbacks. But what is the setback? Well, the setback is the distance within the property lines where you're not allowed to build. So not even the full 60-foot width is buildable because you have a front setback from the front property line of 40 feet and you have side setbacks of 10 feet on either side. You gotta love the listing agent here. They're really spinning this. In the listing description, they describe the shape of the property as having a generous 60-foot width. Generous. You look how narrow the property is, and they're using the word generous to describe the width. Do you really think that generous is an appropriate term to describe the width of this property? Do you really think that's appropriate? I don't think that's appropriate. Probably not. Also, is it even 60 feet? Because when you look at the nearby homes, some of these homes appear to be 50 or 60 feet in width themselves. And yet when you actually look at a reference point, and if you can imagine dropping these homes into the full width of the property, it's unclear if some of these homes would even fit inside the boundary lines. Who knows? You also have wetlands and flood zone on this property in the back of the property, so it really compresses the buildable area. So about half the land is totally unbuildable, and that pushes you towards the front, which is not inherently bad, except for the fact that the soil in the front that's outside of the wetlands and flood zone is poorly drained. So it has Goldsboro and Lynchburg series soils, which are normally pretty good, except for the categorization W, excess water. That means that the water table is going to be high at this location, and that even if you can meet the setbacks to build a home, the overwhelming likelihood is that the land won't perk for septic. So yeah, good luck with that. So the soil might not be good, and the wetlands is an issue, the flood zone's an issue. And even if you can put a septic system in, you're probably talking about an engineered system that's going to cost you a little bit extra. Might be another $30,000 or so in additional costs on top of the normal $7,500 for a conventional. But you got to maximize every blade of grass, which means you have to get a boundary survey to know what your width is. Hopefully there's no encroachment from the neighbors. Then once you find that out, then you got to clear the trees. And then when it's cleared, you got to make sure you can put the system in. Then you got to drill a well. You got to put a well in there. You don't have county water out there in front of that property. So it's just not a good property. I think you're looking at between 25 and 50,000 bucks in added costs if you're able to build on this property at all. Now, how about this bad boy? This is a 20-acre listing at $27,000 in Holmes County, Florida. This one got me excited at first because when you look at the 20 acres for a price that low, you start scratching your head. Look at this property on Cypress Lane in Bonifay, Florida, sold at $100,000, 23 acres. So this is a pretty decent comp, almost 5 times the current asking price. This other 20-acre comp sold at $90K. So there's another one. And then another 20-acre comp on John Marsh sold at $80K. And ours is listed at $27,000. But don't get too excited, guys, because there's an issue here. Yeah, there's a bit of a red flag, which is that it's landlocked. There's no easement, but it's great. It's cool property, but you can't get to it legally without illegally trespassing on your neighbor's land. But don't worry, because according to the agent, when they're describing the access situation, according to the agent, they have a bit of a different take because they're saying that it's really an exciting challenge for the buyer. A challenge, but one that brings with it a degree of excitement for you. But like, is this exciting for you? Are you excited about this? Like, if you're buying this land that's landlocked, is it an exciting proposition to have to push a prescriptive easement through the court system of Holmes County, Florida? Are you excited about that? Is anyone excited about that? What's that? No? Okay, no. So there's over 50% of the land is covered in flood zone and wetlands. And even if you could figure out how to get into the interior of the property with a driveway that would be preceded by a prescriptive easement, then physically the cost of installing the driveway would come after that. But once you're inside the property, you can only really ever use half of it because the wetlands and flood zone are going to limit you. What's funny is when you remove the wetlands maps and the flood maps from the mapping system, you could actually see the wetlands on the satellite map. You see like the deeper discolored trees. You can always spot wetlands from the satellite map, by the way. So the landlocked thing is kind of a big deal because as you can see the comps, if you have access here, this land is probably worth 80 to 100 grand, but the problem is it doesn't. And what I've seen over the years is that when you have a property that's landlocked, it's about an 80% discount or greater to the market value if it had access. And so instead of selling quickly at $100,000, it'll sell slowly at 20 grand. That's kind of the difference of what it really entails. You can't legally get to the property, so you have to have a specific plan for getting that easement cut in. And then once you have that easement cut in, the problem is that it probably wouldn't even enhance the value of the land that much because even with the easement, you still don't have a driveway. So the cost of actually installing the driveway at that location is going to cost you more than the land is worth because you got to clear like a mile of undeveloped land and you got to grade and clear and you got to cut in a driveway that whole distance. So it's just a lot of issues with this. I think that this is not for beginners. I would not recommend that you buy this. I would not buy this. And I wouldn't buy this next one either. Now, take a look at this next property. This is a 2.8 acre piece of land listed at $30,000. It's in Monroe County, Tennessee. It's been on the market for a bit. I think it's over a year on the market, so that's not good. You know, one of the red flags that you see right away is it's called a flag lot. So basically it's, it almost looks like the Little Dipper. You have that long driveway to get to the main road. And that's what we would call a flagpole. And then the interior of the property is the flag itself. And that's where the term comes from. But the problem with the flag lot is that in addition to having less road access, road frontage, it forces the driveway to be longer. So you have a longer driveway that you have to design into your site plan, which is going to add an additional $20,000 or more in cost in this particular case. There's also an invasive vine. It's called kudzu, and it's all over the land here. Kudzu, it's not a good thing on land that you own or would buy. This is an invasive vine. It's called the vine that ate the South, is like kind of what they say about it. That is like resistant to different like herbicides, like resistant to Roundup. You can't just like spray some Roundup at it. It's definitely coming back. And not only that, this thing grows at a rate of a foot per day, which doesn't sound like a lot until you realize that all of the endpoints of the vine are simultaneously growing. It's basically like that scene in Jumanji, except for you have to deal with it at your expense. Plus, there's an HOA. So you have a kudzu infestation here in an HOA property. What that means is that the HOA is going to be like working on the remediation, except for you have to pay for that because there's a $100 per month HOA fee that's just baked in. That has nothing to do with the kudzu. But the HOA, if they do anything for the treatment of this vine, is going to come in the form of a special assessment. Special assessment means that you have to pay extra for the HOA to actually do it because they don't have money. They don't have money. Are you kidding? And the thing about the kudzu removal is it's going to cost about $2,000 per acre per year. So you have about 3 acres on this property. So about $6,000 per year in like actual cost to deal with this successfully across a 5 or more year period, by the way, not across 1 year, like several years. Also, the kudzu is not going to stay on your land. The kudzu is all over all the land in this subdivision. See, this is what it's known for. It's not going to like gently stay within the 2.8 acre. No, it's literally going everywhere. So you're not only going to have to pay for the cost of remediating the kudzu on your land, but you're going to have to pay for the cost of remediating the kudzu on all your neighbors' land as well across a 5+ year period. And plus a management maintenance fee for the because the HOA, they got to get paid too, guys. Let's not forget about that. It's a complete disaster. By the way, I covered this listing about 8 months ago on an earlier video that I released in January that was called "You Couldn't Pay Me to Buy That Land." The point I basically made in that video was you couldn't pay me to buy that land. That was it. I was right. Because the value of this land, it's not $30,000 that they're asking. And I don't even think it's worth zero. Because when it comes to buying land, identifying and avoiding these hidden costs and pitfalls in the process is half the battle. And there's this old saying that it's never what you're worried about that gets you. It's always something else. That's going to be the topic of the next video on the channel. It's called Hidden Signs You're Buying Bad Land. It's going to talk about all the land buying mistakes that you're not worried about, but that you should be. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I definitely enjoyed making it. And thanks for watching.